The contract between Ukraine's Naftogaz and PJSC Gazprom for the transit of Russian gas through Ukraine to Europe, mainly Hungary and Slovakia, expires on December the 31st of this year. Kiev has repeatedly stated that it does not intend to extend the agreement. At the same time, Slovakia and Hungary's dependence on Russian hydrocarbons, especially in winter, is more than critical. These countries, unlike most other EU states, have virtually no alternative sources of raw material imports, and the situation with money to pay for example, LNG, is not very good. All this time, Bratislava and Budapest have been trying to negotiate with the Ukrainian authorities about extending the contract or finding alternative ways to supply Russian gas. However, Kyiv has dug in its heels and flatly refuses to even discuss this issue. Meanwhile, there are only a few days left before the contract expires. In these circumstances, Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico threatened Ukraine with a serious conflict if gas transit from Russia is stopped. If Zelensky does not let our gas in, a serious conflict with Ukraine could arise, Fico wrote on his social media page. He recalled that although Slovakia does not carry out military supplies to Ukraine, it does provide humanitarian aid. At the same time, until recently, Fico did not object to contracts of Slovak private defense companies to sell their products to Kyiv, but he may change his mind. It is known that Slovakia sells fuel and lubricants to Ukraine, and these are obtained as a result of processing Russian oil at local refineries. And this channel may be closed, and this, among other things, is fuel for armored vehicles and motor transport of the armed forces of Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine have not reached an agreement on the continuation of Russian gas transit through Ukraine to Europe, despite Azerbaijan's mediation efforts. Reuters reported this, citing a senior source in the Azerbaijani energy company Sokar. The EU and Ukraine are said to have asked Azerbaijan to facilitate negotiations with Russia on a gas transit agreement which expires at the end of this year. Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin said that a new agreement with Kyiv for gas transit to Europe was no longer possible. Ukraine, which has been resisting a full-scale Russian invasion since February 2022, announced that it will not renew the contract, under which about 15 billion cubic meters of Russian gas is transported annually through Ukrainian territory to Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenski stated that Kyiv might consider continuing the transit of Russian gas, but only if Russia does not receive payment for it until the war ends. However, this condition is unlikely to be accepted by Moscow. The Sokar source claimed that the company had been mediating negotiations between Ukrainian and Russian energy companies for almost a year at the request of Ukraine and the EU. The source noted that high-level executives met with representatives of Ukrainian energy companies on the 2nd of May in Istanbul and the 29th of August in Vienna, adding, in the end, the Ukrainian and Russian sides could not agree on terms. In light of recent events in Syria, the Kremlin is continuing its attempts to retain a naval base in Sudan. However, the country's authorities are not yet making concessions to the Kremlin, although they are purchasing weapons and oil products from the Russian Federation, the Moscow Times reports. Since 2019, the Kremlin has been actively discussing with local authorities the possibility of building a new base for the Russian Ministry of Defense on the Red Sea coast in Port Sudan. However, a civil war soon broke out in the country and there was no time for a base. At first, the Kremlin supported the rebels with the help of the Wagnerites, but later abruptly switched to supporting the government army. Back in February 2024, the Russian ambassador to Sudan, Andrei Chernovol, admitted that the issue of building a military base had again been postponed indefinitely. Russia and Iran are actively supporting the civil war in Sudan in order to then obtain the right from the government to build their bases on the Red Sea coast. A representative of the Beja Dirar tribe, whose army supports the Sudanese government, admitted that it would be difficult to fight without military support from Russia and Iran. These two countries supply Sudan with both drones and weapons. Sudan has not seen such a large-scale, bloody, anti-democratic uprising for a long time. the government has attracted many allies to fight in the country. Iran and Russia are now on the winning side. Sudanese scientist Magdi El Ghizuli said that Sudan is a tasty morsel for other countries because, in fact, it is possible to get not only access to the Red Sea but also mineral resources, of which the country has a lot. You can get a hell of a lot of profit from a country like Sudan, the scientist said. During the civil war, Iran supplied government forces with drones, and Russia supplied weapons, aircraft components, and petroleum products. Ultimately, the arsenal grew so much that a new hangar was built in Port Sudan in early 2024. Both sides of the conflict are actively using drones in the war. Over the past month, officials from Russia and Iran have been actively negotiating the construction of their military bases in Sudan. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan's army said it knew who our friends are and who supports us. He declined to name the countries that actively support one side of the conflict. Bloomberg journalists write that the rebels are supported tacitly by the UAE and Libya. They also supply armored vehicles, drones, and fuel. Experts say Russia, UAE, and Serbia are exporting weapons to Sudan in violation of a UN embargo. One of the military experts also stated that the Sudanese government army is also actively supported by Egypt and Turkey. Russia's shadow fleet vessels exporting Russian oil through the Baltic Sea may be passing through the Danish Straits, accompanied by Russian Navy ships to increase provocations against the North Atlantic Alliance. Bloomberg reports this, citing a Danish intelligence report. The Danish side believes that Russia now has more opportunities to challenge NATO with more threatening military behavior. In particular, this concerns the escort of tankers transporting Russian oil by warships in circumvention of Western sanctions. If Russian Navy ships are indeed used to escort the shadow fleet, this will increase the level of tension. The threats against Denmark have become more serious, the department emphasized. This week, European nations have continued to add tankers carrying Russian oil to sanctions lists. The UK designated 20 more vessels and the European Union a further 52. But broker BRS Group believes these measures are having a limited effect. The shadow fleet is still growing by 10 tankers per month, and exports are relatively unaffected. The company said there are now 850 grey vessels operating worldwide. Of these, 764 are of MR1 size or larger, an astonishing 13.8% of all such tankers, the brokerage added. BRS defines grey ships as aging vessels carrying Russian, Iranian, Syrian, North Korean or Venezuelan oil and operated by companies either under sanction or with little previous experience in shipping. In addition, the Kremlin may begin military exercises near the territories of the North Atlantic Alliance and increase provocations against civilian shipping. Earlier this week, it emerged that 12 northern European countries were planning to begin checking the insurance policies of passing Russian tankers. Denmark will play a key role in this operation, as its straits are a vital trade artery through which Russia's shadow fleet continues to export oil. At this stage, the initiative of the Nordic countries will be to collect data and ensure transparency, since international freedom of navigation legislation does not allow tankers to be required to provide insurance information unless governments have reliable information about an environmental threat. More significant measures based on the information received may be applied in the future, the agency's sources said.